Okay, so some housekeeping and what this guide is, and more importantly, what it is not. What is not is how to model or use Blender. There's a level of expectation that you can navigate Blender and use it and navigate windows on your own. It is also not a step-by-step, paint-by-numbers type of guide. There'll be no put this exact number in the Y rotation or perform these exact actions kind of thing. There's always a multitude of ways to achieve the same result, and the way I explain here is simply the most recent way that I personally use. No doubt I'll probably make improvements over time that better suit my personal workflow. Onto housekeeping. I will be using Blender 5.1. I assume this will work for older versions up to a point, and then functionality will more than likely break. But by that point, my suggestion would be to upgrade to a newer version. Okay, disclaimers out of the way, and on to the bones of the subject. How do you get the 2D images that are used for walls and furniture and other 2D tiles that are in Zomboid out of Zomboid and make them available to use as textures for 3D objects and models in Blender? If this was something you were looking to do, you've probably gone into your Zomboid install folder and gone hunting for those images, only to come up empty-handed, or you might have resorted to taking screenshots of the walls you wanted to use in-game and then cleaning it up in Photoshop to use. If you're a smart cookie, you might have even found the .pack files and are now scratching your head on how to unpack those files. This is where we borrow some knowledge from the mapping guys and use TileZ. TileZ is part of the PZ modding tools and is how the guys that make modded maps make custom tiles for those maps. We're going to use it, but we're going to use it in reverse. Grab yourself the modding tools. You can find them through the PZ modding or mapping discords. I believe you'll find them in the pinned comments somewhere there. Open TileZ, and then up here in the tools menu, there is the option for .pack files, and then what the option we want is the pack viewer. Once in this pack viewer, there is only the one option, which is file. And you will see that there is an option that says extract images, but we need to load the images we want to extract first. So we'll open a .pack file. Now, this is open directly where the pack files are located. Wherever they are located, they're in your computer. They're in your Zomboid install folder, under media, and under the texture packs folder. This address may be different depending on where you've installed your game. Now, the option that we want to pick, the file, is the Tiles 2x. This is the double-sized texture file. So each one of the tiles themselves are double the size and therefore better quality. This is the one we want to open. We'll give it a second to load. Now, if you'll see here, we expand this. This has every single tile that's currently in the game. What you want to do is you want to extract those images. You want to set them as separate images rather than a single tile sheet. If they're separate images, you can then use them as textures. It's at this point that you want to think about how you're going to set up your file structure. You need at least 2 separate locations for convenience. One location for the tiles and another location for your asset libraries. Once you've selected that folder, you'll then hit OK, and I would recommend going to get a snack or a drink as it can take some time to extract every single tile. Once you have all of the tiles, you can close out of TileZ and open Blender. I'd recommend as soon as you've opened your Blender file, and if you've got the default cube and camera and light, you've removed those. Once you've got an empty blank Blender file, save this and save this to where you recently set up where you're going to have your asset libraries. Once you've saved this Blender file in your asset library folder, whichever you set up, we can now set this to be recognized as an asset library. So under the Preferences tab in Blender and under File Paths, the very bottom option, you've got an assets library tab here. In here, you can set the path to where your assets live. So for me, I have assets in my assets folder. I have one for doors, one for windows, one for floors, one for walls, one for vehicles, etc., etc. All different Blender files, but they're all in the assets folder. So once you've set that, and then you can come down to your burger menu, and then you can save preferences. With that sorted, we can make our first wall. Now, our first wall is actually going to be a template that we then use to duplicate for every single wall after that. What I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to make another collection, and I'm going to call this one Walls. And the original collection, I'm going to call Templates. With templates highlighted, I'm going to add a plane. Then I'm going to rotate that plane until it is vertical. And I'm then going to move it along the z-axis 1 meter so that it is on the ground plane. However, whatever size plane that you've created, make it so that it fits. Then I'm going to edit this. I'm going to grab these verts and I'm going to move them to 0 so that it is more like a wall shape. Now at the moment it is twice as high as it is wide. You can decide that if that's the size you want, or you can make it taller, shorter, however, whatever size wall piece you want. In Zomboid, they are roughly, I want to say that they're like 3 times as they are wide, based on crates. In game, you can stack 3 crates on top of each other to equal 1 wall height. There's no exact measurements out there. You pick whatever size you'd like. I'm going to ever so slightly raise these up so that it is slightly taller. I'm fine with that. You can, if you wanted to get more accurate, you could import in the Bob model, the in-game model, stack him T-posing next to it, and you can get a rough size estimate as to how big your walls are. So with that now set, I'm going to first off move the origin point to the very bottom left corner, which happens to be where the 3D cursor currently resides. I'm then also going to apply all transforms so that it is exactly 0 rotation and 1 in the scale. Then we're going to do the textures. So we're going to come over here into material preview. I'm going to hide the sidebar. Let's create the texture by switching the default to full metallic and almost full roughness. This is, I'm not sure why, but this makes it look more like it is in Zomboid. The developers, if you were to import some of their models, they use the same settings for theirs. So with that set, I'm going to open a texture. I'm going to navigate to where I saved all of those texture files. And you can just scroll until you get to the walls, or you can type in wall and then find yourself a nice wall. Okay, so brick wall. Let's go with that. Now, do bear in mind, whichever orientation you pick, you'll be stuck picking that orientation every single time. I personally prefer the brick, or the orientation that has more color than the darker tone one that's in shadow. So pick the lighter of the two, or the shadow, whichever one you pick. Stick with it. And our wall looks awful. So what we're going to do is we're going to open our UV editor. We're going to open our image. We are going to hop into edit mode, grab the face. Let's set the orientation correctly to start with by projecting it from view. Then over here we will grab the verts. I model it usually by the very bottom verts and then just Scroll up. You don't want to go all the way. As you can see, there is a small corner to this, so that in-game the walls don't look like they are single pixel thick. We don't have to worry about that because we can actually make them thicker. So with our texture now applied, we can close our UV editor. And what we can do, popping over into object mode, we can take this plane and we can name it template. And then we can remove the image that we were using. I know we just applied it, but we only realistically applied it so we can get the UVs correct. So what we want to do is grab this template, duplicate it, and then move that duplication into the walls. Let's hide the templates for the time being. Now, this option is the same material as the template. In fact, if I just turn that on so we can see the difference. If I change this in our new model, so if we grab the blue one, they both change. Now you don't want to change your template. Sorry, you don't want to change the template option. So rather than doing that, let's hide the templates. You want to click on this number 2 to make it unique, which gives it a new name. You open, you navigate again. Let's try house this time so we can get there quicker. Let's get the brick texture. And if we just turn this on, we can confirm it hasn't changed the original. What I tend to do, and this will make a bit more sense later, is I grab the name, I copy it, and I change the material's name to that. I also change the name of the object to that. Okay, that's our first wall is now done. If we hide this, turn these on, let's move this guy back to where he should be. Let's duplicate him. Move him into the walls. Switch that so I can see him. Again. Hit the number 2 so it's unique. Open. Navigate to the next tile that we want. Let's go with the blue one. Copy and paste the name of the image so that the material matches. And then the object matches. So now we actually have 2. Now what we can do is grab both of these. Let's move them off to the side so they're not overlapping each other. And then we can grab both of them. And this is where we turn them into an asset library. We right click, mark as asset. And then they've got this little icon next to them, which shows that they are part of a library. Let's access that library by splitting the difference and hitting our asset library. Yours won't look like this because you don't have any yet. So you'll over to your current file and you've got this. And they're very difficult to see and they look bad. Even if we make them bigger, you can't quite figure out what they are. Now we can make these look a lot nicer. Highlight one of them, press N or click on the little arrow up here and you'll bring up the side panel and you've got the little preview here. If you hit the open tab, you can go over to your original tiles, vanilla, and then you can pick the tiles again. But rather than typing out what they're called, you can, and this is the reason why we've named the object like this, you can just copy, and then once you're in, paste, and then just grab which one it is. It's this one. And we'll do the same thing for here. We'll just copy, paste. And as long as you've got the right option, so I wouldn't recommend doing modeling every single item in the game and then applying the assets. Do them in batches. You then have a nice looking asset library. Now to make this better, you want to create a catalog over here. Name the catalog whatever you want. So walls would be the easiest. Now if you pop over here to unassigned, grab both of these, drop them in walls, and then you would hit save. I don't have the option here because this is not my asset library location, but provided you've got the Blender file saved in the asset library location that you've set up here, you'll have the option to save. And then when you change this from current file to user library, so you'll see here that I have all of my walls. That I can now just simply, if I come up here, open a brand new Blender file. I already have mine set so that my asset library is already here. I can then grab my walls and drop them in material view, drop them in, and then provided you've got your snap set, you can model them together. You can then add arrays to make walls longer, however long you want, and essentially you can rebuild an entire building. Now you'll see in my library I've got different shapes. These correspond to the different shapes that you'll find by default in the vanilla tiles. And if I open my asset library, so if I open my asset library, you'll see in my templates folder, I have all the different shapes. And each one of these corresponds to a different wall type. So we've got all the ones for the roofing, we've got the default size, and then a mirrored one for particular ones like garage doors, which are mirrored. That one just has the UVs facing the other direction. When you eventually decide that you want to start modeling more complex objects than simply walls, if I open up another one of my asset folders, let's go with props. These are more complex objects that you can find in Zomboid, and all of these in the original game are 2D tiles. So the way I've done this, unfortunately there is no magic option with these. This is just modeling. You need to learn how to model objects, and then I just use, so for example, if we isolate the vending machine here, and then I open its UV texture sheet, we edit it, and we hit all. It's based on the original tile, and it's just simple geometry with extrusions, and I don't even think it even has any bevels to it because it's all flat. And then the same thing again in the asset browser. I've just reused the tiles in order to categorize what each item is. There are some unique ones in here that are 3D objects that don't exist in the game. These are mostly multi-tile objects. Like these tables are actually made up of multiple tiles. All I've done is I've simply added them together in Photoshop and then saved out a separate image. So hopefully now you'll be able to build your own buildings based on all of the tiles. Blah, 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 blah. Hate the ending.